Hola a todos, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidos hoy a un episodio, un espacio diferente. Digo episodio, pues estoy tan acostumbrado a grabar mis videos en mi canal, pero estoy hoy en un canal diferente con todas las personas que nos están acompañando en este Behavioral Way Summit Event 2024 que se está llevando a cabo en España. Pero hoy estamos en un espacio virtual, estamos en un espacio especial donde yo los estoy acompañando desde Lima, Perú, así que saludos desde aquí, pero en realidad no los ven ahorita, pero ellos la van a ver muy pronto. Me están acompañando personas profesionales top de la industria de Behavioral Science que se dedican específicamente a comunicar, así como yo, que tengo mi canal en YouTube. Para los que me conocen y los que no me conocen, tengo un canal en YouTube. Vamos a ver, vamos a ahorita darle bienvenida a otros profesionales que tienen unos canales extraordinarios en diferentes plataformas como YouTube, como Spotify, y vamos a conversar un poco acerca del reto de nuestra perspectiva de Behavioral Science, porque muchos de nosotros trabajamos ya varios años en este campo, pero queremos compartirles a ustedes y entre nosotros también, porque eso va a ser muy divertido para nosotros, compartir cómo es vivir o trabajar con temas de behavioral science desde un punto de vista de nuestras comunicaciones, es decir, nuestros podcasts, libros, comunidades, newsletters. Es muy variado lo que existe, así que tenemos una selección bien fina, bien interesante de invitados hoy día. Y ya, lo que sí les tengo que decir es que el español lo vamos a dejar aquí nomás y voy a hacer un cambio al inglés porque nuestros invitados pues son de diferentes partes del mundo y vamos a siempre hablar el idioma común, que es el inglés, así que ahí espero que me puedan seguir sin mayor problema. Y voy a cambiar al inglés en 3, 2, 1. And now we're into English to welcome our guests. I don't want to take more time right now, just want to bring him up. And welcome to Samuel Salzer from Habit Weekly, Melina Palmer from Brainy Business, and Tim Houlihan from Behavioral Groups. This is so awesome, guys. Like, thank you so much for being here. This is like really exciting for me. You're my heroes here right now.
Yeah, exciting. Super fun to be here.
Delighted.
Awesome. Thank you all. So we're going to start off with some questions because the idea of this space is to talk about our experience as communicators in behavioral science, right? Like every single one of you, I know you have an extraordinary job. English is a tough language sometimes. In working in as consultants, as educators, and different fields inside of behavioral science. But the thing we want to talk today is about your experience trying to communicate this and spread the word of this discipline, not only to people that are specialists and are professionals, practitioners, but also to people that maybe they heard about behavioral science the first time in their lives, I don't know, or they're working on a business and then suddenly they hear about this. So I'd like to start off asking first to Melina a quick question I had, and because I'm a big fan of yours and I've read your books and everything is so interesting, and you've been author of so many books, having your podcast. And one of the things that it's pretty obvious when you read a book from Melina or you hear her in a podcast is that she's speaking to a wide audience. She's not speaking to the practitioner specifically. She's speaking to business owners, to entrepreneurs, or maybe corporate professionals. So, Melina, tell me a little bit, like what have you learned about sharing these different types of experiences through your books, through your podcast? What is the most challenging thing about communicating to someone who's not actually a practitioner of this field?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. And of course, thanks for reading the books and listening to the show and everything. I would say that what I have found in this sort of space that I accidentally maybe created for myself is, I just have a knack for helping to take something that is very complex and helping it to feel applicable to people kind of regardless of your background. And I know from over the years where I've had people say that the show was their, 8-year-old daughter's favorite thing to listen to while they're going to school, and they're, listening and learning, and there are PhDs that are listening to the show as well. So I think that knowing what we already know from behavioral science, that being able to communicate something in a simple way that makes it where it's clear and you can see a tie in of how this can be working without having to feel like you have to go out of your way to use really big fancy words or, trying to make it more complicated, I think can really help anybody to connect to the material. For me and at the Brainy Business, really, we have focused that our whole role and job with the company, with the show, with the books is to help people to feel inspired, like where you're first getting a glimpse of this and say, oh my goodness, what is this thing? I can't wait to go learn more about it, and feel empowered, like they can just go do one thing instead of feeling really intimidated by, wow, there's a lot of stuff there. And it's like, that seems cool and scary, right? So it's trying to help it to feel like it can be easy, because really it can be easy to test, a simple reframe of how you say something over here, or testing out a different image, or just looking at a color, just being more thoughtful about how you create content or how you're communicating with people, helping people to know that it can be simple and easy by focusing on having the way that we communicate the content to also be simple and easy and fun, is just the space we come from. And I would say I've been lucky. I thought it was interesting, in your question about where is it difficult, how is it difficult to do that? And I found, fortunately, to this point, it's really not, partially because it's my style, I guess, so I think being authentic to however you communicate is really key if you're going to be out in the world sharing content. And for me, simple, fun language is just sort of the way that comes to fruition.
That's something I've always felt it's really characteristic about every single media you share. Like, it does feel authentic. It does feel like Melina is talking like Melina, not trying to, oversell or trying to overcomplicate things. And I have actually also noticed that in your books, that you're really specific on doing like one task. Like, don't get overwhelmed with information you're sharing. Like, just do one small thing, and that is so awesome and so easy to digest. So I can completely understand that. And what are the reactions that you learned or you've seen of people reading your books? I can understand maybe people come up to you. You don't have to, or you may want to sign books or stuff like that. So what are like the feedback you get from your podcast, being actually such a big podcast and so many people are listening all around the world?
Yeah. So I would say, one, I love signing books. Please bring them around. That's always fun, especially when it's like unintentional, not like, so if I'm doing a keynote and they bought a bunch of books and I'm signing them, I expect that, right? But when someone's like, oh my gosh, I brought the book, I'm so excited to have you sign that, that's super cool. And I don't think that will ever get old. So that's very fun. As far as, feedback, I think the top things that really stick with me that are just, again, in that like never get old sort of world. So one is, it is amazing to me how many times I will have people reach out and say, is it weird that I feel like I can hear your voice talking to me while I'm reading your book? Like, I can hear you saying that. And I feel like that is the top compliment, partially because people listen to the podcast first, but I really focus on my publishers. Like, they don't necessarily love, I use a lot of like M dashes and ellipses. So like the ... and like big dashes and parentheses, like way more than what most people use and what is considered correct. And I feel like it makes it really clear where I'm wanting a pause and where I want you to think about something, right? I'm thinking about that reading experience to match the way that I speak. And so that people have said just spontaneously, some people that I know, some people I've never met before, say they can hear me talking. Super cool. I love that. And I would say the other thing is, it's been really great from the podcast and carrying through to the books, where people will reach out and say, I'm in Spain or Germany or Japan or Peru or wherever, and say, and I read the book and I did this thing and I was able to do X. Like, we raised our prices by 20% and the people bought even more than what we thought they were going to because we tested out bundling, or we've doubled our sales this year because we've been applying what we learned in the truth about pricing, or I was able to get budget to go on to a conference I really wanted to attend because I used anchoring techniques that I heard you talk about in What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, or whatever else, right? So that people really do apply the stuff and feel like they want to let me know about it, which I love, and get to share about it and talk about it is fantastic. So I think for me, and people that have gone on to go get degrees in behavioral science after reading a book or listening to the podcast, it's just really cool that people can actually do something with it and are maybe not as excited as me, because as we've said, I get really excited about everything. But they're really excited to share. And I love to hear those examples that people are able to get without having to actually physically talk to me. It helps to spread that knowledge and that ability beyond the one-on-one conversations that I can actually be having with people, or people that I can have as clients, or the number of keynotes I can do, when the books and the podcast help people to do something and they feel like they know me too, is just really, really cool.
Yeah, and I can remember that you share in your books and in your podcast that type of very specific experiences, right? Like how to apply this in an easy way, and not necessarily being like a huge business with huge budgets. No, like if you're an entrepreneur, you have a business, you can do this, and you can do this with your pricing. That's what you focus on your last book. It's really cool. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really into it. And you share a lot of like methodology, like step 1, step 2, step 3. So it's really easy to digest and to apply. So, and the other thing is I saw Sam and Tim nod as well as I did, and I guess we all agree that I can really hear your voice when I read your book also. So that is like really cool. You have a really cool and very strong way of communicating. So awesome. Thank you, Melina.
Yeah.
So
Can I
go
say
ahead,
one thing
Sam.
about that as well?
Yeah, sure, please.
To this point, I think what Melina, you do really well is also, bringing the voices of the people that follow the podcast and so on into the podcast in a really nice way. And
That is so true.
I think I actually remember where I was when you shouted me out. Like, I don't know, this was a long time ago. We were probably already friends by that point, but I had made some comment about something relating to what you've been doing. And then you kind of give a shout out during the podcast. Like, hey, I appreciated this comment from Samuel, and he said this and this. And I think you're really, really good at just pulling kind of the people who follow and the people who are writing to you, making them part of the experience as well. So I think, yeah, kudos to you. I was at the gym. I was at the, I think,
I was gonna ask
maybe
you,
either running
were you?
or on the bicycle. Yeah.
I love it. Oh, that's so great. I love
That is so
that,
true.
Sam.
I want to add to that. You mentioned, Carlos, in the introduction about as science communicators, we're using books and emails and podcasts and all these different methods, right, to communicate. And Melina is a master of really figuring out how to aggregate and get that authentic message out. Because as science communicators, like, we're not just like DHL or FedEx. We're not just carrying the package to the last. We're interpreting it. And this is something that, of course, I admire greatly about my colleagues here, Samuel and Melina, is being interpreters of a vast amount of information to boil it down for an audience that's going to make sense. And then to use all these different media to get that message across. It's exciting, and I think you have to be passionate about it, as you can see Melina and Samuel and I are, because I think without that passion, well, we just wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah, because
right,
it's a lot of work, all of the stuff, right? So I know I've always been amazed by Sam. Like, I think we've talked about this. Like, I do not know how, from the beginning of days on this, that it's like, how did you possibly read and listen to everything that you talk about in Habit Weekly? I read a lot. There's no comparison to what you're doing. I don't even understand how you can be reaching out and finding everything that everybody is doing. It's amazing. And I'm in total awe of that. And if you weren't passionate about that yourself, like going out and finding the content, going, ooh, what about this? And wow, what about that? Like, it wouldn't exist, right? It's because you found something you were interested in that you wanted to share. And I would say, Tim, I love the way that, as just there's space for everybody, right? And the way that Behavioral Grooves brings in the music element. I remember talking with you and Kurt, and I don't remember, must have been a time I was being interviewed on your show versus maybe it was when you were on the show, on the Brainy Business, Tim. See, we've got all sorts of like connections between this group for sure. But that we were talking about where the grooves came from, and that you were like, we're grooving. And Kurt was like, no, that's not what it's about. It's about like grooves of the brain and like the way that this comes
it's
together.
A big tent. Yeah, it's a big tent. Yeah. Absolutely.
That is so awesome. Yeah. So since you mentioned Sam, I would like to now put Sam on the spotlight here. Thank you so much, Melina, for sharing your experience with your podcasts and books and writing. And Sam is following that same path. In your case, like Melina said, you have this incredibly difficult job to consume so much information and then produce not only this newsletter that you started out so many years ago and that has helped so much people with Habit Weekly, but that then just transformed itself into building, I would say, maybe one of the best or most well-known communities in regular day-to-day behavioral scientists, behavioral designers that are interested in learning. And then with a behavioral design podcast that is already now, I think it's in your 4th season, if I'm not mistaken, and it's going so cool. It's so well, like so fun to listen to. So like, what is it? Since you have all this experience dealing with so many people that are around the world are consuming your information, what is like this must, or what is it that people are expecting from you and Habit Weekly in terms of content? Like you do so many things, but what is it like the most important one?
Well, first of all, by the way, buenas tardes, Madrid. Hola todos. I have to say a little bit of my Duolingo Spanish here.
Cool.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think for me, I would say how all this started for me, and I think it's true for everyone here, is I kind of would have a weekly, kind of stumbled into it. Like I didn't really have a plan to do it in many ways. It was kind of something that came out of me trying to create in the world that I wish existed, because, we're all practitioners here. And I so vividly remember, getting started and just feeling so overwhelmed with all of the things that is happening. And obviously there's one side of it when it comes to happening in academia, what is published, but then what we're all struggling with is kind of what is not published, what is happening in the applied side. And there you have to be like kind of ear on the ground, like what are people doing here? What are people doing there? Like what is going on? And it's really hard to really like stay on top of that. And with Habit Weekly, the goal was just to kind of like, well, if I'm struggling with this, like if I'm really struggling every week to find what's going on, could I just make it a little bit easier for people by putting that into kind of a one newsletter every week to kind of follow and to make that a little bit easier. So I think that was probably the beginning, and I think probably people follow it in some ways for like a kind of a FOMO reason. Like it's easy to feel like you're missing out on what's going on in the world. But I feel a lot of people message me saying that, okay, at least knowing that I've opened Habit Weekly, I don't feel the same FOMO every week. Like I feel like I've kind of at least have somewhat grasp of like what is talked about, what is happening, and so on. But it might be interesting for people to know that for Habit Weekly now, having grown as a newsletter for almost 6 years and become quite big, it actually started in a very, very small way. So it started with me actually just on LinkedIn posting like, I think I call it like my behavioral design insights of the week. And I just posted about it on LinkedIn and had like 5-10 likes or something. I'm like, not bad. And then the next week I got like 15-20 likes. And I'm like, this is catching on. Maybe I should come up with a name for this. And then I was like, Weekly Habit. And I was like, no, domain not available. Okay. Habit Weekly, because I work with habits a lot. So I was like, oh, okay, something on a weekly basis, Habit Weekly. And then it was actually someone who messaged after like the 5th or 6th post after 6 weeks being like, can you put this in a newsletter? And then it became a newsletter. And then, I made kind of a commitment to try to do this for a year and see how I would go. And so then it's been kind of going on from then.
That is so cool. Like I can completely relate to that experience, and it's grown so much. So, but again, like it's already a challenge to manage a newsletter with so much information, and you're curating that for all of us, us included. Like every time I look at your newsletter, at least I know that I'm not missing out on something very important that's happening in the business. But then you have the community side, and that is a huge challenge that okay, it's because you can create content and then share it, but then managing a community, like what is from your experience a must? Imagine like many people from Latin America, from Hispanic America are asking, hey, where is a Spanish community, where is a Brazilian community? Like maybe many people want to build a community, but they don't know how, or what is it like, what is the must that they have to consider in keeping that community alive. So from your experience, what could you share, or what has been that challenge for you?
Yeah, sure. So I think what immediately comes to mind for me as kind of the main lesson that I've learned on a personal level comes actually from a former colleague of mine. She was a service designer. She's a service designer, and I was working with her, and I remember she was really big on this really core principle as well within behavioral science, which is to make the user part of the solution, which was basically the idea, is to kind of, instead of creating something for people, kind of find ways to create something with people. So try to make people kind of be part of the solution in some ways. And I think that is what I've seen for the most part with the various different types of communities that I've been a part of building. It's very tempting to kind of build a community where you're kind of like trying to just tell people what to do, what to read, what to follow, what to kind of various things. But I think the only communities that I think are really successful and sustainable are the ones where they're kind of harnessing people in the community itself. So like they're making the community members part of the solution by either maybe helping with kind of coming up with ideas for what kind of topics to explore, or actually, what I think was one of the most fun things was kind of where we set up some communities would have weekly, and then that actually started people talking, and then they realized that actually we feel like the main community is not serving us. So they're like, can we start a sub community for people that are like in this very specific kind of thing? And then like, yeah, sure. And I think that's something like, we don't have Bessie represented here, but that's another, fantastic initiative with some great people. I was at an event yesterday with Scott Young hosted kind of on some interesting stuff. And I think they also do a really, really good job of trying to like do a little bit grassroots stuff, like having very much focused on smaller kind of interest groups and let those interest groups lead the way. So I think that's probably like, if I had one thing to say, I would say that's the main lesson.
That is so cool, because that's true. Like you're talking about this, and I'm thinking about the Slack, for example. That's Slack channels that you've made with different interest points. And just to share that, there's a really cool Spanish community in the Habit Weekly, let's say, mega community that you can find so many people, and that's such a good job. And just, I know I didn't share this question before with you, but it just came to mind right now. Like, have you seen any shifts in let's say the profile of people that are joining your community now lately, since if you compare it to when it all started? Maybe, I don't know, when it started there were more like specific scientists or whoever, but now maybe it's more diverse. Have you seen a change, or is it like the same type of profile?
Yeah, so I guess, I'm happy to share some we've done some insights around like who is a part of our community, like, because we have, I would say at this point, probably a lot of people that are doing applied behavioral science are in some ways either following the newsletter or being part of the community in some ways. And so we have a little bit of a sense of like, where are people based, like where are people coming from in terms of kind of backgrounds. And I would say when we're creating internal segments, we have realized that there's 3 segments for us that we look at. And so there are, call it the behavioral learners. So there are people that are like studying to become something related to behavioral science or something like that. So kind of aspirational in that sense. We have the behavioral practitioners in some way. We talk about them as like the people with behavioral directly or indirectly in their title. So like behavioral user researcher or a user researcher that are doing behavioral science stuff. And then we have what we call like the adjacent professionals. So they are the people that are maybe they're not looking really to become behavioral professionals, but they're just looking to leverage behavioral science in their role. So they're a UX designer or they're a product manager, and they just want to like not completely become something different. They just want to like become better at using the behavioral science process in their work, for example. And I would say we have seen like that it's relatively evenly spread actually, like across those things. I think it helps that like randomly I heard this week that someone who studies at the Duke they have some form of Duke University arm that is based in China. In their behavioral science classes, they recommended to follow Habit Weekly. And so we get a lot of people from randomly following Habit Weekly from there. And we have a lot of like classes around the world who are studying behavioral science that are kind of recommended to follow. So we do have quite a bit of people coming that way, but I also think there are a lot of practitioners and there are a lot of adjacent professionals, a lot of people that are like not so much looking to switch completely, they're just looking to kind of like understand how they can make use of behavioral science. And that was a quick thing about demographics as well, which this has been blowing my mind since we started Habit Weekly. And it's where you can look at like where are people based, like where are people based around the world. And you see the kind of usual suspect. We see like a lot of people based in America, a lot of people in the UK. But then for a long time, basically since the beginning of Habit Weekly, Peru has been like top 10 forever. Like,
awesome.
I don't know what's going on in Peru, Carlos. You were clearly the reason why. Maybe.
No, we love your work. Awesome.
Yeah. It's been like disproportionate, like hundreds and hundreds, and like probably 1,000 people at this point. I don't know how many people like around Peru, Colombia, Latin America, but like there's a lot of people that are based there. And so I think sometimes, this is really beautiful to be here today because I think it speaks to the growth of the field in kind of Spanish-speaking part of the world. But I think there's so many people that are doing great work. Then I think, I'm really excited to see that as well.
That is so cool, and thank you for sharing it. Like my heart just pounded because it was like, like many people in Latin America in general are every time more interested in behavioral science in general. And your channels, the three of you guys, you are like the go-to place. So I'm more than happy to know about this information. And I just love what you said about the different types of profiles, especially the behavioral adjacent, right? Because many people want to learn, many people are already working on this, but that shows that this is interesting for everyone, not specifically for like the extremely passionate, like psychologists or economists or whatever. It's like it's passionate, it's gaining ground on many types. So really cool, Sam. Thanks for sharing those insights, and congrats for everything that's going on with Habit Weekly right now.
Yeah, and I would say last thing from my end, I would say you mentioned I have a podcast, and I'm very happy with the podcast in many ways, but I'm not a native speaker in English, and I have made it work, but I feel like so much below the people here in terms of like having podcasts. Like I think, how can I compete with the voices of Tim and Melina in terms of having a podcast? It's impossible.
As always, very humble.
Very kind of you, yeah.
Very kind.
Go ahead, Tim. Can I just say, Carlos,
please,
that I feel I'm trying to remember, Samuel, when we first talked. I think you were first on the show back in May of 2020. So that was early in Habit Weekly. But I think that you and I actually had a couple of phone conversations before Habit Weekly was formed. And I just want to say I totally disagree with the way you just characterized your start of Habit Weekly as not having a vision. I thought you were very clear. It seemed very compelling and very focused. And what has bloomed and blossomed under your guidance with Habit Weekly, this idea of the learners and practitioners and the adjacent professionals, this is a natural expansion on your drive and passion to communicate this very simple me search. I think it's just fantastic. And you bringing Aileen into the podcast, I thought was a cool idea. But everything that you've done, I think, is just so perfectly connected to this original vision that you had, that really helps people understand on a weekly basis. It does. It eliminates that FOMO. I don't know what's going on. Oh, here's something new in my inbox. Now I've got something new. Now I've got a reminder. Oh, this is what's going on this week. And I think you've done a fantastic job with that. And it's really cool. It's really cool to be sitting here and have that conversation with you today after all these years.
Well, yeah, that means a lot. Thank you, Tim.
That is so cool. And just want to chip in that if you want to see Sam's acting skills that are so really fun and cool, you have to listen to one of the episodes where with the AI. I think, Sam, you made you asked the AI to build like this story, right? And you and Eileen just acted out. That was so cool. That was so fun. I enjoyed it so much. So it's not only that you're doing such a great job as a host, but I think you have really strong acting skills, right?
Well, again, I think in that sense, shouting out Eileen there, because in terms of the heavy lifting, I think I had like 5 lines across like 15 minutes, and she did everything in one take. Like, she was incredible, and I just really chipped in with some like very short
highly recommend that episode.
Intimidations. Yeah, so. But yeah,
indeed.
Thanks again, Tim, and thanks.
You were the reaction. You're going, what? Oh my goodness! Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, really
if I can add to
Sure.
something that Sam was talking about there, we for the Brainy Business too. It's really fun, I think, to know that the 3 of us all started around the same time and got to know each other in those early days, and then kind of looking back, like Tim was saying, like reflecting on some of those early conversations as we're all like navigating these very uncharted waters and finding a space. What I would say to everybody who's listening, and we get this advice too in the like, don't, look at what is created here and be like, well, until I can be doing twice weekly podcast and have a great, amazing newsletter with the umpteen zillion subscribers from around the world, and I'm doing this and that and have a community. Like, we all started with like, well, I'm going to try this thing, right? Like, with nothing going on, and like see what happens. And where, Sam said there, I'm going to commit to a year. I did the same thing with the Brainy Business. I said, I'm going to do this every single week for 1 year. I'm never going to miss before I get to evaluate if it was valuable for me or not. Right. And you just show up and you be consistent, and then you get to adapt over time. And we at the Brainy Business have actually identified pretty similar categories to what you're talking about there, Sam. Like, we focus a lot in that, people that want to just layer this into their business, but aren't looking to become, get a PhD necessarily. Plenty of them listen, but that's not really who we focus our content on. But we look at learners and doers, and every doer that's going to be doing stuff with us, if they're hiring us to help train their teams or whatever, they have that learning mindset. And then also, we are finding champions. There's a champion in an organization that like gets it, right, for that behavioral thing. And then they're trying to like be pushing that rock up the hill. They're trying to get things moving, and find those people, those entrepreneurs are so key to the entire field moving forward. And so we're really speaking to those people and helping to support them, whether it's through trainings or books or podcast episodes or whatnot. And so similar kind of groupings that we're talking to. But I think it's just kind of cool to see that we're independently doing very similar stuff.
Indeed. Thanks, Melina, for those words. Really, this is such a fun space, guys. I mean, I've never seen like everyone like having you guys talking to each other and sharing like all these years of experience and recognizing everything that's been not easy, but I think we're doing really a good job around here. So thank you, Melina, for sharing. And now let's go with Tim. Thank you, Sam, for your experience. Now I'm gonna put Tim on the spotlight. Tim, you lead the Behavioral Group podcast with Kurt, and it's not only, again, maybe one of the most recognized podcasts. I would think you guys won the Habit Weekly the awards, right? Many, I think that more than one
and
time.
Gabs. Gabs Awards.
And
Didn't you
Gabs
win
Awards.
one? I mean,
Yes.
I would say like
Multi-award-winning.
top award-winning behavioral podcast over here. Like shout out to behavioral groups who I am jelly of all the time. Good job,
Thanks
y'all.
for sharing that, Melina. Also, yeah, exactly. Tim, like you guys have a really strong channel there going on, and you have so much information, so much content. But something I wanted to ask you is that okay, so normally in a podcast, the usual thing that maybe we all do is that we have these interviews with specialists and people with different backgrounds, but from time to time, you and Kurt come up with these really cool ideas of making like your mini seasons, and where you talk to other specialists, but then you edit everything like and you're telling us a story like the one you had with they thought we were ridiculous. That I actually think is one of the best ways to learn about how behavioral science started for all of us. And lately, you also had this also mini 3 episodes around group polarization regarding the elections in the US. So how do you come up with ideas of refreshing and changing the way a normal, let's say a usual podcast happens with your guests, and you go to try these new things, because it's a lot of work. I remember you or Kurt mentioning it, right? Like it's not only difficult to interview people, now you have to interview and build this new product. So what is the experience around that?
It's a great question, Carlos. And when I think about like your audience and what they would want to hear, I feel like the best place to go is it's the content itself. It's that there are things out there that Melina and Samuel and I encounter that are bigger than just one podcast, right? This is why Melina's writing books. This is why Samuel doesn't always, some of Samuel's articles are long, right? They're lengthy. There's more than just 2 paragraphs. There's a lot to say about something. And we felt that there are certain topics that just deserve more attention than just a single show, a single 1-hour interview. And there's more than one person. So they thought we were ridiculous is a great example of where we felt like the origination story, the birthing of behavioral economics, was a story that was worth telling. And while we started with George Lowenstein as sort of the capsule that got us thinking about how did this actually get started, it led to a lot of really wonderful interviews with Danny Kahneman and Richard Thaler and behavioral scientists all over the world, actually, to better understand what's going on. But we wouldn't have done that, honestly, without, and I'm going to follow Samuel here. He shouted out Bisai, who is not here, but Andy Luttrell with Opinion Science. And Opinion Science is a fantastic podcast that if you're not listening to Opinion Science, I want to encourage your listeners to check that out. But we partnered with Andy Luttrell, who's a really brilliant storyteller. And honestly, he brought a lot of storytelling expertise to our team. And so we started with aggregating contacts and putting together ideas for what we wanted to tell. And it seemed like this is like a 5-episode series. This wasn't, if we were going to actually tell where it got started, how it got really sort of into the mainstream, and then where it's going, we were going to need 5 episodes to actually tell that story. And it was really fun to be able to do that. The most recent episodes on polarization, that series came from, we got an invitation to go to MIT, to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, for a 3-day conference on polarization. And we just talked to so many researchers there that we felt like this isn't just, we can't just boil this down into one 60-minute or 90-minute episode. It just felt like there was much more content there to share. And the feedback that we're getting from our listeners is that they really like that. They like the continuity of story that goes along with multiple episodes. So it's certainly something that we're going to do more of in the future. But Carlos, it was a lot of damn work. It really was.
I can really think about that, because also something very characteristic on your episodes is that like for example, in my case, in my channel, I just, talk to someone and then I just upload that interview. But you
Yeah.
guys actually talk to someone, but then you actually have to edit that, and you comment, and you have like these small introductions of, you explain like what just happened in that conversation. You think about it, you work, you talk about it with Kurt. Then at the end of the episode, you have this space where you both, again, you digest everything that just happened. So there's so much work. It's like everything you guys do on the podcast is not just interviewing, it's really interviewing and then processing that information. So how do you make that manageable with your day-to-day jobs, and again, having so many followers that are maybe asking you for more information and more content?
I don't know. I don't. I mean, I'm looking at Samuel and Melina, and I think that we're all in the same boat. That if you're to think about Habit Weekly or the Brainy Business, we do this because we love it, and we find time to make these things happen. When we started the They Thought We Were Ridiculous series on the history of behavioral economics, Andy and Kurt and I got together, and we had a couple of sessions to discuss what we thought it could be and laid out the project. And in our third meeting, we asked the question, how long do we think it will take? And we said, and we're all people familiar with behavioral science, so we said, let's give ourselves 6 months. But wait a minute, because we know the planning fallacy would be in our face. Let's say 9 months. Let's set our goal at 9 months. And it took 2.5 years.
Wow. So
crazy. Andy had a baby in the meantime. Kurt had a son go off to college. I think the important thing is that if it is something that you love, you'll find a way of making it work. Right? I can see Melina shaking her head, because this is who we are. I mean, we aren't just science communicators. We are communicating something and practicing something that we love dearly, and find it so additive to our lives that finding the time, honestly, I don't know how. I don't know how I find the time, but I absolutely do, because it's fantastic. Samuel, you want to jump in here?
Can I say one thing? Because I think
Sure.
like what you're speaking to is, I think, a really important lesson that I would say, like, that's probably a lesson that we would all kind of share with people who wants to create content in some ways, want to share things. It's kind of like to follow your curiosity and not follow the likes, for example. And I think what you've said and spoken to it, and I think you illustrate honestly through all of the fantastic work that behavioral groups is really like showing, really like kind of like you following your curiosity of like, okay, we're really interested in this, like, okay, let's make it a 3-parter, because like we have to dig into it, like, and I think that is something that really makes creating content actually something that lasts, because you then do it for those reasons that are kind of intrinsic, rather than, I think the risk, and I think all of us has probably fallen there, is to look at like, what does the number say? Like, how many listens, how many likes, how many whatever thing. And then you quickly realize, like, okay, that's not going to be very healthy, and you kind of have to steer your way towards the curiosity instead, and like follow that instead. And I think you guys do such a good job with that, like really showcasing that.
Well, and isn't the curiosity is the one constant in the entire story, right? That our numbers might go up or down, or the amount of time and energy that we put into it might wax and wane. But one thing we can count on as a constant for all of us is curiosity, and that passion fuels it. I think that it's so much fun to do it. And if I could add this, Carlos, we learned so much from like that history of behavioral economics, that They Thought We Were Ridiculous series. We learned so much, not just about production in that project, but about what it is that it takes to make a movement, like not just the creation of behavioral economics as a thing, but how you get people together and how you create something that is big enough to be its own thing, to be literally a discipline, and how you sustain it is actually quite remarkable. So there's all kinds of layers that go along with these series specifically that we really just love to explore.
That is so cool. That makes so much sense, and I completely agree. Thank you guys for sharing that information, because again, I just feel like this is just starting, right? So even though some have more times doing the podcasts or the newsletters or stuff, we're still comparing ourselves to other disciplines. Like, I don't know, think about marketing, right? How many years is marketing in the business right now, and behavioral science is just some couple of decades old, but like really right now into business, not that many years. So all that information, Tim, that you and all the team behind behavioral grooves work on, we really appreciate it so much. All that effort with those 2.5 years working on that segment, that really helps a lot. For example, for students, for people that have to or want to learn and don't have maybe time to find the right book on what happened or how did behavioral economics create. It's such such engaging experience to listen to you guys and telling that story, and from the voices, actually, from people that also maybe are not with us anymore. Also, that you got the information, you got some recordings that are going to be very important for our business. So thank you so much, Tim, for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Cool. So guys, this has been such a fun conversation. I love you guys just chipping in and maybe asking and everything. We're a little bit running out of time now. This is it always happens, right? Just time flies by so fast. And I would just like to ask like one very small question. Maybe we can keep it short just to make sure we can stay on track. But Sam, is there something you'd like to work on or do in terms of your communication channels that you're not able to do right now? And the same is going to go for everyone, so just prepare your answers.
Actually, I don't know. Can I say something else? Can I answer a different question?
Sure.
I'll give a advice based on the amazing work of Tim and Melina. So basically, the main advice is to use behavioral science to teach behavioral science or communicate behavioral science. And I think we talked about Melina does such a great job of using lesson from behavioral science in terms of making it simple, like making it easy, making the concepts so that you can take away clear lessons in such a fantastic way. Tim and Kurt in terms of bringing the fun, bringing the grooves, and really making kind of listening to podcast about behavioral science can be kind of boring. Never with behavioral grooves, always fun. And so like remembering to bring behavioral science to teach behavioral science, I think, is a really important thing. Didn't answer your question, so I'm very sorry about that. But
you did something much better. I'm gonna change my question. Like this was the question I think we needed for this segment. So thank you, Sam. Obviously, your experience hosting just gave me a really interesting idea. So yeah, let's go in that direction. Thank you so much, Sam, for that ending note. So Melina, let's go on that path. Like, do you have any suggestions, any final thoughts on what we're talking about, communicating behavioral science?
Yes, I was ready to answer the other question. Just saying, I did my homework.
Just go on. Just go straight into it. If you want to chip in with that would be awesome. Also,
so my answer to the other question, to the original, is that for us, and anyone who's seen my TEDx knows that I'm like in a not yet. I have to not yet everything because I want to do all the things. I think this kind of answers both questions, right? I am the queen of FOMO, and I see everything. I'm like, ooh, I could do that. I could help this person. I could do, like, I see all the things and how they can be this something amazing at the end, and I cannot do everything. And so having to put something on a shelf and say, until I finish this thing, I can't do that next thing and get distracted. For us, I would say the white whale of the Brainy Business is really good video and YouTube, and being able to up our YouTube channel presence. And we have video from almost all of our guests. But as we're going through this process of trying to go through the nightmare of editing it into something like what Tim and Kurt and Andy put together with the series and looking at storytelling. And then when you add a video component into telling those stories, it's like a whole other nightmare problem. So that's really like my dream, is to have amazing, YouTube and video presence. And maybe 2025 is our year. I don't know. Someday. But that's what I'd say for us.
It's a good plan, and it is a nightmare. And I don't know if you guys have been joining maybe on Instagram, TikTok. Those are other nightmares, really difficult to challenge also. So thank you, Melina. I think we can all relate to your plans. So awesome. Thank you so much. Tim, what about you? You can choose any question you want at this point, so don't worry.
Well, I'd like to say the frame from the behavioral groups perspective that we are doing everything that we want to do, but we're rolling things out sort of slowly. So we may not be presenting everything that we are going to be presenting in the next year, but we are working on all those things. So there isn't anything that's off my list.
Okay.
And to kind of get to Samuel's comment, I'm so inspired by especially young people who are in touch with, and I'm sure Melina and Samuel have this experience as well, that there are young people in college or even in high school who reach out and say, how can I, tell me more about this. I want to talk to you about why you are a science communicator. And that I don't ever want to claim that we might be inspiring them, but the fact that we might be available to see them as, that they might be able to see us as a potential role model, I think it's just so cool. So we just need to keep doing that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you all for being with us. This is all the time we have. I would love to have another space for this, but thank you so much. And now I'm just gonna send you guys back home. Thank you for being here, and just gonna say a quick goodbye to all of our listeners for today. See you very soon, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice seeing you.
Bien, entonces aquí eso fue, la verdad que se nos pasó volando el tiempo. La verdad que ha sido una experiencia increíble para mí poder hablar con Sam, con Melina, con Tim, que son personas que escucho todo el tiempo, leo, veo su contenido. Es impresionante, de verdad, el poder estar en una sola mesa conversando acerca de los retos que nos encontramos comunicando el tema de behavioral science, de behavioral design, de behavioral economics, a los diferentes segmentos, a diferentes países, a diferentes personas. Entonces, espero que hayan disfrutado mucho este espacio. Muchas gracias a BeWay por organizar, por ayudarnos a tener espacios como este, ya sea los que hayan podido estar físicamente en España, en Madrid. Espero que hayan disfrutado, que estén disfrutando muy bien de esa experiencia. Los que estamos desde fuera viéndolo de manera online también. Y espero también que les haya gustado mucho la conversación que hemos tenido hoy día. Así que nos vemos muy pronto y de verdad gracias por todo, por todos estos años de estar escuchándonos, de estarnos siguiendo, y espero que sigan muchos años más y por favor compartan más estos canales con personas que conozcan. Nos vemos muy pronto y espero que sigan aprendiendo y consumiendo más contenido de behavioral science.